today is November 26, 2013. This is Sahara Chenier. I'm here with Mr. Derrick Robinson, President of Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. Mr. Robinson and I are here to discuss the September 1st, 2013 emails between him and Mr. Alexis and issues related to those. Mr. Robinson kindly provided me those emails on October 18th, 2013, and on the same date I published them to facebook.com/snowyoke/notes. Snowyoke is the acronym for Stop Non-Consensual Experiments on All World Citizens. Snowyoke's purpose is to help peacefully raise awareness of non-consensual human experimentation worldwide in an effort to help make it stop. Snowyoke's motto is Together we can reclaim a healthful environment for ourselves and our children. Mr. Robinson, would you please start by sharing with us some of your background, especially as relates to your forming Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chenier. Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, began as an organization back in 2005. Actually, I was not the originator of the group. The original former of the group was a lady by the name of Sylvia, and she began by canvassing the victim forums around the internet and inviting people to unite against the targeting and to form an organization to combat this situation.
Are you able to, sorry, go ahead.
In January
Go ahead, sorry.
In January of 2005, okay. So in January of 2005 was basically our very first meeting, and she had formed a Yahoo group, and we started there. And about a month later, someone came up with the idea of doing conference calls, and which we all thought was a great idea. So we started doing that in February next month, and we've been meeting on Saturdays ever since. So that's how the organization started. And what happened after that, though, now Sylvia, she was a dynamic leader, people liked her, and but she was also electronically battered. And pretty soon, after the group started, her torture increased. So after a few weeks, she started to miss some of the meetings. And so then when she missed, then I would fill in for her. I was kind of informally her second in command. And so I would moderate when she wasn't there. And then she began to miss more meetings, and I began just fill in, and pretty soon she stopped coming altogether. So we just continued after that. So we've just been carrying on ever since. So anyway, that's how the group started. I kind of inherited it from Sylvia, and it wasn't what she had in mind originally, but it happened that way, and we've just been going on ever since.
I understand. Are you able to, go ahead. You said it's been a few years?
So I was going to say it's about, 8 years now.
Right. Are you able to tell us Sylvia's last name, or does she want to keep that anonymous?
Well, actually, she never really shared her last name with us.
Okay, I understand.
I did. Okay, so it was only like the first few months that I was with her, and we just called her Sylvia, and there wasn't a real reason to know her last name, and she never really divulged that. I think I did see it in print once or twice, and I don't remember what it was. So it was something Israeli because she's from Israel, and that was really the connection that her and I had, because I studied Hebrew while in the Navy, and so I would practice the language with her, and that's how we became, friends. That's one of the reasons why we became good friends.
Well, I have one last...
She's also very likable.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry, it's just a little time lag. I really don't want to interrupt you, so go ahead.
Okay. She was also a very likable individual, at least from my perspective, and we had a great time together. We had a lot in common.
To your knowledge, what's Sylvia's status today? In terms of her health, is she alive? Is she still being tormented? Go ahead.
Well, I hope she's okay. I did receive a phone call from her a few years ago. This might have been 2009 or something like that, when she called me. And what happened was she had fled New York City, where she was living, and she went to Israel, and in hopes that the attacks would be easier for her there. But she found that they weren't any lighter on her there. And in fact, she said the targeting was even more severe in Israel than in the U.S. So she was very tortured there when she went to Israel, and that was really the last conversation I had with her. I don't know if she gave me her email address, and I tried emailing her, and shortly after that, her email started coming back, and so I haven't really heard from her since.
Well, I'll ask the audience to say a prayer for Sylvia. I hope she's just somewhere peaceful, recovering her health. And I do want to ask you two related questions. I want to ask you if that, I mean, I can probably guesstimate from what you've just said, but would you tell us something about what your knowledge is of why Sylvia founded Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, and then why you became involved and decided to take it to the next level? My understanding is that in 2008, February, you formed it into a nonprofit organization officially so that people can donate with tax-deductible donations.
Okay, as to why she started the organization?
Yes, and then why you took it to the next level and made it, I believe, a 501c3 organization so that people's donations would be tax deductible, and you really, have been very organized about it. I see you put out the newsletter like clockwork virtually every Saturday. There's been a couple of emergency situations. You could not be in two places at the same time, but it's really very impressive. I've seen for years that every Saturday, like clockwork, people can basically depend on that newsletter.
Right, I tried to make it consistent for people because there's so many victims, and they have, in this particular situation, there's not much to hold on to. Shanier, I have the landlord knocking at my door. Is there any way we can pause the tape, or do you have to keep going?
I think it's safer not to pause the tapes because of the angles and everything we worked out to get things set up. But you could go to where I can't hear you, and I'll just cut out all the blank feed, and I'll just stay here. I'll wait for you to come back.
Okay, I think you can edit this part out, I guess.
Yeah, I can edit it out.
Okay, I'm sorry. Usually there's no interruptions, but I don't know. I'll be right back.
Okay. This might be a good time to insert the narration of the email set of September 1st, 2013. So it turns out I think that's where we'll go ahead and put that in this video presentation. This video presentation is part 1 of 3 that I'm doing as a follow-up to the written format Snow Yoke note mentioned in the introduction. And this part I will do my best to release this month, November 2013, after completing the post-production. The note that it's following up on, again, was done on October 2013. And It's published there at facebook.com/snowyoke/notes. And the date on it is October 18th, 2013 specifically. And then the second part of this 3-part video follow-up will aim to be posted. I'll aim to post it the following month, December 2013, followed by the third of the 3-set video follow-up to be posted January 2014. It's also a good opportunity to note for people who are not that familiar yet. The people who are will already be thinking about this possibility. There has been some escalated electronic harassment on my end, so I do have direct experience also with the subject matter, but I'm not focused on that at this stage in this presentation. And also, Mr. Robinson has his own familiarity of direct experience as well, and I would surmise that most likely that is part of the reason he decided to work as tirelessly as he does on the subject matter as well, but we'll ask him specifically when he comes back. And also, it's very common for certain types of interruptions, etc., interference to occur when people are working on getting the word out on this type of material. And then even after they have gotten the word out, even actually very large mainstream television news organizations, I've seen some very interesting news reports on the subject matter that mysteriously get edited down and or removed. If they were online, their pages disappear from the internet, and things like that tend to go on. If people are doing a radio broadcast of this information, suddenly they have technical problems with the phone call switchboard, etc. But I believe Mr. Robinson is back with us now. Let me just check the screen. Yes, he's well centered in there. Hi, Mr. Robinson. Thank you for coming back. I was explaining that was a good place to insert the email set. Oh, it's not your fault. Don't worry about it.
Okay. We should be fine from this point.
Okay, thank you. I took the opportunity to bring the audience that might be new to the matter up to speed on potentially one of the things that people who are familiar will be thinking is that might or might not have been a coincidence, the timing. But in any case, I think I was asking you 2 questions basically about the reasoning behind forming Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, both to your knowledge why Sylvia might have started doing the activities to form the group, and 2, why you chose to take the group to the next level.
Okay, I really didn't know Sylvia before she started the group, so I got sure of what she was thinking before she started. But the idea was that she wanted to unite. She wanted all the TIs and all the forums to come together and to unite against this problem we were having. As far as Sylvia and I were very close after we met, and we talked a lot on the telephone. We shared a lot, and I was unofficially. And then during the meetings, when we started to have the conference calls, I volunteered to write notes of the meeting and publish them, so that sort of like a secretary would make notes of a meeting, and so that people would have a summary of what happened. So I did that every week. So I guess I was more involved with the group than anyone else. And it was because of that involvement, and since no one else was, that kind of prompted me to moderate when she wasn't there. And everybody seemed, okay with it, because they kind of associated me with Sylvia, and it just seemed a very illogical thing to do, and so that's how that happened. So after we started having regular meetings on Saturday, and I realized that she wasn't going to return, our next step was we decided that we needed an official name for the group. And we wanted to form like an organization because it would, when we're talking to officials, when we're talking to the press, they can relate to an organization as an issue rather than as individuals. It adds credibility to their story, and people could refer to a website or what have you. It gives more cohesiveness to the issue if there is an organization that people can turn to for information, for questions, for support, and what have you. So that was for relating to the public. It made us easier and gave us a connection to the public and to officials and things like that. So that is why we decided to take on a name, and then later to incorporate as a 501c3.
Okay, so that means that people's donations, I believe, are tax deductible. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and would you please tell us the name of the website?
Yes, our website is freedomfchs.com, www.freedomfchs.com. And if they have questions about our organization or about the targeting experience, we can be reached toll-free at 1-800-571-5618.
Okay, would you tell us some of your background now, more specifically to you as far as that might relate to Mr. Aaron Alexis's background and or concerns?
Okay, my background is that I came from the Navy. Actually, my targeting started while I was in the Navy, and back in it was the last year of my enlistment, which was around 1982, 1982. And what happened is that even after my enlistment, and I realized after I got to my hometown that the targeting had followed me there. So from that point on, for the next 20 years, I have been dealing with this situation, this organized stalking, and remote monitoring, basically alone. So when the internet came along, I finally signed on around 2003. And then in 2004 was when I finally found a group of people who were also similarly targeted, which was astounding because I always felt that I was being singled out. But here I found people who had very similar symptoms as to what I was experiencing. These are people that had mind reading that was happening. They had the stalking. The protocols were exactly the same, and it was just amazing to me. I felt there was hope, and I remember just feeling a little bit of elation, being elated that there were others who were also possibly experiencing this. It was just a little bit of doubt that maybe some of these people were that it was basically something that was created by the stalkers to kind of deceive me, because there's so much deception that they're involved in. So there was a little bit of doubt until I could really understand that these were actual victims of government harassment, of the organized stalking, and the electronic harassment. So for the first few months, I was, but still, even after I first saw them, it was a great weight that was lifted because I realized that I was no longer by myself in this situation. So that has been a comfort to me all along.
Is there a specific name for the group that you found online, or was it just kind of people congregating across various forums online?
place was basically forums. And actually, the name of the forum that I found was called Mind Control Forum. And it was a place where people posted what was happening to them. And I was able to observe their targeting situations, which mirrored mine in many instances. And that's what clued me in to realizing that there was a great targeting program that was happening nationally that I was also a part of, and I was not the only one being targeted in this manner. So it was greatly liberating for me to see that. So there were several victim forums around even in those days, and so I started to join them and to start to document and interact with them at that time.
Now, I have a question just for clarification. I think I know the forum you're referring to. I found it very informative as well, but not to be online at the present. I believe it was called mindcontrolforums.com, and that it had over 600 survivors accounts. Is that the site you're referring to?
I think that was a different site that you're referring to.
Okay.
This was on a site called Easy Boards,
okay,
as I recall, and there were a few of them around the web, and this one was not as active as some of the others nowadays, like MC forums or MC activism. It was more static, and it wasn't as interactive as some of the other ones. And it took me a while to find the really active ones, but I was able to join them, and it was during that time, actually that same year, later that year, in December of 2004, was when Sylvia came along. And, my first impression of her, I thought there was also something from the perps because she was an Israeli Jew, which meant that I could talk to her and practice my Hebrew. And I thought, well, maybe this is something, some type of deception. But I discovered that she was actually intent on forming a group to combat these targeting experiences. So I was very impressed with her as an individual. She's very dynamic and very likable individual. And I thought she related well to most people. She had a very strong personality, and there were some conflicts with some of the people in the group, but by and large, she got along well with most people.
Now,
we were all looking forward to working with Sylvia.
Would you elaborate on your? I know that I believe you said you had top secret clearance. Is that correct? So you might not be able to say very much about it, which I understand. But would you confirm if that's the case and elaborate on exactly during what years you were in the Navy and how it may have overlapped with the NSA?
Okay. Basically, I was in the Navy from 75 to 1982, total of about 70 years. And my assignment, my work, you would say, my position, was as a linguist. I was trained in the language of Hebrew, and I had no idea at that time how that would be applied in the Navy. So my first duty station, my first assignment was actually the National Security Agency. And I'm like, well, who is that? And so that's where I learned the language and met some of the people there. And NSA, most people may not realize this, but first of all, it's located on an Army base, and it's run by the military. And the people that run NSA are Air Force Marine. So one of those four branches of services is the person that runs NSA. He's one of those categories. So, and what we were doing there was totally military. It's not domestic. In fact, any type of domestic spying was considered taboo at that time. So we had no knowledge and no activity on the domestic scene at that particular time. So anyway, it was all military work. My work was all military related. So there are people that are curious about my work at NSA, but I saw no stalking activity, saw no signs of it. I saw no signs of electromagnetic attacks on anyone, civilian or military, during my time there. So all of that I discovered after I left NSA.
Now, just a couple last questions on those issues, and I'm going to switch to some issues directly from reading the emails. One is, when you say taboo, was it more than taboo? Was it illegal at that time to do domestic spying?
Right. At that time, we were tasked with foreign targets, and that's all I'll really say about that. But we were tasked with foreign targets, and we're not, and anything domestic was, off limits. Was considered off limits, and that's, that's something that was not within our realm of activity. So, I really had no knowledge of anybody doing anything domestic at that particular time, either working with any civilians in any capacity, as far as spying or anything like that.
To your knowledge, was that at least in part because domestic spying, at least at that time, was it illegal?
Well, basically, it was because I would say that that's really the domain of the FBI to do any type of domestic spying. So, so we were tasked in a different area.
Okay, but you're not sure about whether it was technically illegal.
As far as the NSA charter goes, they were tasked with foreign targets, and it's not in their charter to do anything domestically.
Are you
say that much?
Are you not allowed to say whether you know or think it was legal at the time, or are you not sure?
Well, as far as legality, if it was not in their charter, then they're going over the legal limits.
I see. And can you confirm, did you have top secret clearance during that time?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to, you have your email set handy, correct? I'm going to look through the email. I highlighted some particular questions I'd like to ask you to clarify. I'm going in order, chronological order. One of the things that Mr. Alexis referred to, he said, I've recently come under attack after blowing up at Norfolk Airport in Virginia. Do you know what he's referencing?
Oh, yes. There was an incident, and I saw this, the news covered this incident, where he had an altercation with a family. They were actually coming back from a family reunion, and I guess they were in a good mood, and they were laughing and talking. Aaron, apparently, according to the story, he internalized their laughter as being directed at him, and he approached the lady. Actually, this lady was in a wheelchair, and he confronted her as to, was she laughing at him? And she was in a wheelchair, so naturally the family rallied to her defense, and so an altercation ensued, to the point that security had to be called, and to keep Aaron and the family separated. So yeah, it was a major scene that happened at the airport, and this kind of thing can happen to people who are targeted in the community. They might feel that somebody laughing around them is laughing at them, because once you realize that you're under surveillance, then everybody becomes suspicious, and that's part of the protocol to lead you to a state of paranoia where you're afraid of everything and that everybody's against you and things like that. But in some instances that might be true, and other instances it might not be. Personally, I don't think it was in this particular case, and it was this altercation that he felt was pivotal for him. And he said after that he started noticing that he was being followed, and some of these attacks started to happen.
Okay, now I've read that there were...
Microwave attacks.
You said microwave attacks and so forth.
Yeah, he seemed to indicate from his emails that that's when he became under attack.
Under what kind of attack?
Being followed and being microwaved.
Okay. I did read...
And also the sleep deprivation.
Okay. I did read that there were some other instances where he was either arrested or cited with some kind of similar behavior, and that in all the instances, any charges were dropped. What, if any, significance do you attribute to that set of behavior, and both on his part and on law enforcement's part or on the witness's part? Does that seem to indicate anything to you, any kind of pattern or anything like that?
Well, we can extrapolate from what we know of those experiences, and it seemed that he was beginning to get suspicious of some of these individuals, that maybe he was just starting to notice certain things here and there. And because he became so sensitive to this lady's laughter, it kind of indicates to me that he was somewhat aware that he was being watched. And it could be related to his secret security clearance that he had, and he felt that perhaps the Navy or someone else was watching his every move. I think that after that incident in the airport was when I guess things started to go into more consistent targeting at that point. Just extrapolating from his experiences, and I guess that was when things started happening more rapidly, perhaps. And that's as far as I can tell from his emails, that's when he started to really start experiencing the physical manifestations, like the vibrations and the voices and the microwave energy attacks. So it could be that whereas he might have noticed surveillance prior to that airport experience, after that he might have noticed some physical things. We can only guess about that.
And what about... Go ahead. What about the other side? What about the other side of the matter? Like, from my understanding, there were any charges that had arisen were dropped. So is that true also in the most recent case at the airport?
About the charges?
Yeah, that there were no charges outstanding.
Oh, no, I don't think there were any charges related to that incident.
Right, and from my understanding, I believe he was honorably discharged from the Navy. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, he was.
Okay, and also from my understanding, at the time of the tragedy, resulted in deaths, including his own and some other people, many other people, very sadly, that we're hoping by raising awareness of certain potential underlying problems could be avoided in future. From my understanding, he was also actively employed and he had active clearance to get into the Navy Yard and so forth at the time. Like, he wasn't sneaking in there or anything like that. Is that correct?
Right. He did have a clearance to enter the building, so it wasn't like he had to surreptitiously enter the building or anything like that. He walked in, by security.
He was still actively under the employ at the Department of Defense. Is that true?
Well, of his company, which is TI Experts, and which is a contractor who contracted with the Navy.
I see. So I would ask you this, based on your experience and your knowledge of such matters, does it make sense that they might, because I see how the media, mainstream media on television has been trying to portray the matter as if, maybe they did not know that he seemed to, quote, have a temper or such things. Does it make sense to you that they were not aware of the behavior that was occurring when these charges had been potentially filed, or grounds for charges were occurring and outbursts were happening and then things were being dropped? Does that make sense to you that they were just unaware of such behaviors?
Do you mean the Navy? Or when you say they?
The Department of Defense, his employers.
The Department of Defense, if they were unaware of him?
Yes, basically
or the ones that are surveilling him?
Right, basically people in an official capacity that had provided him clearance to enter the Navy Yard. Does it make sense that they might have been unaware that he had been experiencing outbursts that was where such as the airport incident?
They may have known about that, but since there were no charges filed, there's not a lot they could do about that. So legally, he was entitled to enter. I don't really see how they could have intervened in that particular situation. What they could do, they didn't have to allow him to enter. They can be more diligent about people entering, checking bags and so forth for weapons and things like that. As far as their security policy, apparently that he checked out. Having a bad temper would not disallow someone from entering a building or from getting a security clearance. They would have to commit some type of violent act that would have resulted in prison or something like that, I would say, before.
Oh, I see.
Or jail.
Well, what about if they thought he was mentally unstable? Would it make sense that they would consider him to be mentally unstable, or would it make sense that they did not check whether he was found to be mentally stable?
Apparently, there were actually some incidents. They didn't really go into detail. Some things that happened while he was employed there that may have, he was only there for like a week or something. But if the matters had continued, he probably would have been let go from there because there was some type of incidents that were happening. So maybe he foresaw that and just decided to take matters into his own hands. Something was happening, either because I remember in his first email, he said that he didn't allow them to scare him off his job. So something was happening at work that he felt they were trying to intimidate him in some way.
Okay.
So he didn't elaborate as to what was happening there, and something was going on at work, in the work environment.
But at that most recent job...
In his...
Go ahead. At the most recent job, he had only been there for about 1 week?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. He arrived, I think he got access to the building. I mean, he arrived from Rhode Island, as I recall, around the 25th of August, and he was preparing to go to work there in the Washington Navy Yard. And I think he started there around the 9th, as I recall, from press reports.
Okay.
So I believe he was there for just about a week, as I recall.
With that particular contractor of the DOD?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, just a very short amount of time he was there.
And what about the previous incidents? Does it make sense that they were unaware of the previous incidents? If, say, charges had been filed, as long as they were dropped, would that cause them to be unaware they had ever been filed or that they had ever occurred?
Well, he was not arrested. I mean, the police came and I guess they took a report in those particular instances, as I recall. And it was something with a neighbor. He shot out the tires in one incident, as I remember. But there was no mention of him being arrested for those, or charges being filed. And when he had shot through the ceiling of, he felt that the people above him it was either in a hotel room or something like that, he felt that they were using some type of device that was keeping him awake, and he used a gun and shot through the ceiling. He explained it away to the police when they came, but I don't think they didn't arrest him or anything like that. He was pretty fortunate on some of these occasions because and he actually went to the police and told them he was hearing voices and all this kind of thing. Oftentimes in our community, when we've gone to the police, their reaction is to take us immediately, in many instances, to the psych units. But that did not happen to him. The officer actually made a report and wrote down exactly what he said, and he was, and that was all that happened. He was not forcibly detained. So he was very fortunate in all of the incidents that the police didn't really get involved. They didn't arrest him or anything like that.
Okay, so it does seem reasonable potentially that even if he had been honorably discharged from the Navy and then after that he became employed by a contractor of the DOD, if it was these events occurred in between employments that perhaps the government might not have realized that those incidents had occurred or those events.
Right, even, they probably did not realize that those things had happened. Unless, I guess as an employer, the main concern was if this guy had been to jail or anything like that. So, absent a prison record or jail record, then they felt that he was okay. And probably those incidents, even though they did involve a firearm, those probably did not appear in the background check.
Oh, that's interesting.
No arrests, anything like that. And honorably discharged from the Navy, the military. I guess they felt he was all right as a candidate for the position.
I see.
I can only extrapolate their thinking, but So anyway, that would be my guess as to why they hired him anyway.
Okay. And now he mentioned that the hotel that he was in, that he thought he could escape what he was experiencing by leaving the hotel he was in. And then he added, it wasn't until it almost cost me my job that I realized that one, I wasn't crazy, and that two, that I had to figure out what was going on. Would you be able to tell us, because I believe, and so I would like you to be able to inform us, that the type of activity he's referring to, having issues where he feels like he has to go leave a hotel here, maybe leave another hotel there, and issues of being driven off his job, are those in fact issues that are common to targets?
Well, at first, when you're trying to figure out what's happening, um, that is very common for people to become very frightened, and they might become irrational. And in his email, he mentioned that he was going from one hotel to the next. I guess he felt he was, he felt that he could escape the voices that were around him. And, if he was hearing people in the next room that seemed to be talking about him, and he became frightened because he felt he was under surveillance. So the solution for him was to leave the hotel and go to the next one. But what happened was that those incidents followed him from one hotel to the next, which is a very common protocol in our community. If you leave one area and you're trying to escape harassment, it usually just follows you. So that's what happened to him. And it was in the midst of all that he came across our site, and he started to look at some of the protocols that we list on our homepage that kind of outline various forms of harassment, and the following, stalking, the voices, the microwave weapons. Many of the things he was experiencing are listed there, and he seemed to indicate that after he saw our website was when he was able to realize what was going on. So he said, in the email, he said, I'm glad I found the site. So the thing about him, though, is that he also had a security clearance, and I did offer to talk to him by telephone, but he declined that because he was afraid that they would be listening. And of course they probably would be. And whatever it is that he wanted to share, he felt that he could not share it while they were listening. So that was his concern. And he felt that he was under extreme scrutiny having this clearance. So he didn't want to talk he wanted to talk to us, but he felt he couldn't. And he even said that he didn't want to get myself or himself into trouble.
Right.
So I guess he just felt that he had to take matters into his own hands, was his conclusion, since he couldn't talk to any of us. Fortunately, most people do not feel that they are restricted in that manner.
Right, that's true. Most people, I would say, cannot relate to that kind of scrutiny around the clock.
Right. Some people are kind of concerned about talking to us because I hear this a lot, that they feel that their phone is monitored. And so I just kind of reassure them that all of our phones, everyone's phones, are monitored. So that kind of sets them at ease. So, but anyway, with Aaron, I guess he felt that he didn't want to get himself in trouble, so he declined the talk on telephone.
Okay, I have two related questions there. One is, can you elaborate on what I'm thinking about is I've read a lot about what they call workplace bullying, workplace mobbing, organized stalking in the workplace. Do you think that might be the type of activity he was referring to? And if so, could you elaborate on that?
Okay. Mobbing or workplace bullying are a couple of terms that we use for that, or organized stalking. It refers to, in a work setting, it's when employees conspire together, usually to try to get a targeted individual, a certain individual, terminated from his job. And this is something that Aaron Alexis felt, he seemed to imply that that was happening to him, that they were trying to, quote, scare him off of his job. Is what he stated in his email. So how they went about that, I'm not real sure, because that isn't very clear. But apparently there was some type of harassment that was going on in the workplace there, and even the company mentioned some type of incident, which they didn't elaborate upon, regarding him.
I see.
So, yeah, there was something happening in the workplace there. Yeah.
Okay, and then my other question is, in the reference he made to, given his employment, not wanting to risk getting either himself or yourself in trouble by communicating with you about certain matters, at least over the phone, could you help the regular person to understand what kind of trouble and risk he might be referring to?
Well, as far as risk for him, he might have been afraid of being terminated from his job. He was a new employee. He just started, so he at least at this assignment. So he was concerned about perhaps being released from his job. So and I guess in his situation, it could have been several possibilities as far as people who were following him, surveilling him. It could be somebody from the Naval Department. It could be somebody related to his company. He probably was not real sure who exactly it was that was following him. I think he finally decided that it had to do with the Navy, though, by the action that he took. And he felt that the attacks on his physical body, which he indicated were starting to take a toll on his body, the ELF attacks, he felt that they were emanating from the naval facility, I believe.
Please tell us what.
That's why he took matters into his own hands.
Please tell us what ELF stands for.
ELF stands for extremely low frequency.
Okay, and
that's what he felt that he was experiencing.
Okay, can you elaborate? Because I think part of what I'm wondering about, with regard to risk of trying to talk about the matters, I believe it's probably elevated for people under the employ of the Department of Defense, probably for some other people as well. I believe there are certain potential secrecy oaths and so forth, especially given certain clearances. Could you maybe tell us if those are some of the types of concerns he might have had as well?
Well, I believe his security clearance was with his company rather than the Department of Defense. And this contractor is one, I guess it has contracts with several naval facilities. So, because he traveled a lot, he traveled from one facility to the next, and the Navy Yard was just basically one of his assignments. So, is that what you're asking?
Well, actually, there's two things I'm still wondering about. Do you know how long he'd been under the employment of the particular contractor?
Okay, from as I understand, he He first started in the summer of 2012. Was when he first started with them, as I recall.
Okay.
And he started some training programs and so forth.
Okay. Now, might any kind of government secrecy oaths be an issue, or would we just be thinking about more like private company confidentiality clauses, that type of thing?
Right. He wasn't working directly for the Department of Defense, so I don't think that any type of oaths were involved. Perhaps just security clearances and matters related to legalities regarding that, and work related to the company itself rather than the Department of Defense. So I don't think any type of oaths were involved.
Is it possible that any type of secrecy oaths might have been involved, even left over from when he had been in the Navy?
Well, no, not, as a technician, that was the type of job he was involved in. Didn't seem to involve any particular secrecy. And I guess preparing certain equipment and things like that.
What about for some other...
Not unless he had a secret.
Go ahead, sorry, not unless...
Not unless he was involved in any type of top secret security program. And even in my case, it was basically a matter of signing papers rather than, because I had to have a top secret security clearance myself. And there were certain papers that you had to sign and things like that.
Does it bind you indefinitely ever after from talking about certain matters?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There are certain things I can't really say about, I can't talk about exactly what I was doing even many years later. So, it was top secret. So anything that regarding anything that I did back then, I certainly can't talk about. Just only in general terms, but not specific things.
I see. Now, I have heard some initial reports that potentially there were some other people that were suspected of being potential accomplices to Mr. Alexis. They were described as both males, and they're appearing to be from 40 to 50 years old and dressed in military and or paramilitary uniforms. Does that indicate anything in particular to you?
Okay, I have heard certain theories about that, and I don't see that is the case.
Okay.
In my opinion, anyway.
Okay. It was a Navy yard, so potentially people were just dressed the way they were dressed and there because they were there. Other people in the Navy or in related uniforms perhaps interacting with them at that location. Is that something that you're thinking perhaps?
Well, they were civilians, and you often find a mix of military and civilians, and on bases and things like that. So it sounds as if they were basically engineers. I think one of the guys was, as I recall, and professionals in some capacity serving. Working for the Navy. So that was true at NSA. We had lots of people, lots of civilians there. Actually, there's probably more civilians than military at NSA.
Would some of them like to dress in, say, camouflage wear and things like that because of the environment that they're in?
No, they dress in regular civilian attire.
Okay, because I did hear at least some reports that they were seen dressed in either one in what was described as a Navy uniform and another in what was described as if not a military uniform, then a paramilitary-looking uniform.
Okay. Well, it's probably a mixture of some type. But even while I was in the Navy, working at NSA, I didn't wear my uniform. We actually dressed in civilian attire.
Okay.
For most of the time. We wore a suit and tie, things like that, coat and tie, things like that. So we weren't dressed in uniform either.
I see. So I'll see what happened to those initial reports, because they seem to have kind of dropped off, and see if maybe it seems more meaningful, or if it seems less meaningful than what it seemed to initially indicate. But going back to the email set, he ends one of the paragraphs like he didn't quite finish his sentence or finish his thoughts. I wanted to ask you for insight into what he might have been, where he might have been headed. He wrote, "I think I know the specific group in the military that is responsible for developing and assisting the military with." And the sentence drops off right there with the word "with." So would you maybe provide some insight into what he was probably getting at there?
It seemed to be that I think the name of there's a civilian contractor that works at the Navy Yard that builds ships and airplanes, submarines, Naval Base Command or something like that is the name of that company. And they have a contract with the Navy, and they are familiar with all the systems that go into these vessels, and it employs engineers and all kinds of disciplines, professionals. So he feels that these systems were installed on naval ships and submarines, and I believe that he felt that that's where these attacks, that this weaponry is what the Navy had been researching, and that some of it was emanating from the naval base, I believe.
Now,
from a sinking.
Okay. In your response, you wrote, "This is a national as well as international effort." Would you describe what you're referring to outside of just the United States of America?
Well, yeah, we have other targeted individuals in other countries that work with us and try to address this situation. We have, there's a European organization, ucash.org, that is similar to our organization. It's a coalition against covert harassment. European Coalition Against Covert Harassment is the name of the group. And they do a lot of similar things that we do in terms of acquiring members and people to bring public attention to the targeting that's happening and to the mind control technologies. So in Europe there's a group, in Asia there are many targeted individuals there, China, India. India is starting to form a good sized group there, and Australia, New Zealand are places where they're targeted individuals. South America, we're starting to find more there even. There's a few in the Middle East and Africa. So just about everywhere, we've been in contact with people from all over the globe that have contacted us who are experiencing these similar things happening to them. I think if everybody spoke English, we would hear from a lot more people. But so far, we've heard from people in nearly 50 countries that have come to us describing this targeting experience, and we are trying to bring them all together to create a global response to our situation. So these are some of the efforts that we have made this year, and hoping to expand those efforts in the coming year and so forth.
Okay. You wrote, governments often are abusive and usually do not regulate themselves. Would you elaborate on why you would conclude that? Is there a particular history that you could highlight or point to?
Well, we feel that our targeting is coming from government research. It is there's a lot of information you can find on the internet about how the military and the intelligence agencies have researched electromagnetic properties of the electromagnetic waves and how they can use them to access the human mind and body. There are people like Jose Delgado who did extensive research and was very successful in his research on animals and to a certain extent on human beings. And some of those experiments can be viewed on YouTube with cats, monkeys, and even a bull in Spain. So that information is available. There were others like Ross 80 from the Brain Research Institute of UCLA. There was Jose Delgado at his time at Stanford Research Institute. Eldon Bird did work for the Marines, directly doing animal experiments with electromagnetics. So all of this research has been going on for decades, mostly unknown to the general public. And so people have no idea, in most cases, that the government has been researching ways to access people's thoughts, emotions, their memories, and all these, the human brain actually to access and control the human mind and the body. And once you access the human mind, you can access certain points and control remotely the human body. So all of this, they have researched and are still researching and utilizing these technologies upon the general public. So this is basically what we're trying to convey to people so that we could hopefully find help and to get these practices and these criminal activities stopped.
What about...
So all of that information is available for people. Yes.
What about Project MK Ultra, for example?
Okay.
Do you believe that, could you tell us if it sounds like the type of project that might be happening today, and whether you believe that after the government inquiry into it that included participation into the inquiry by Senator Edward Kennedy, do you believe that testimony that such project had stopped and that it's just been done with ever since then?
Well, it started in 1953. MK Ultra did. It was a CIA program, and they had in mind to access and control a human being, even against his. Their idea basically was to capture a person. Can they get control of this individual so that they would do this person would do their bidding, even against his own will, and even against his own natural instincts of self-preservation. So they were actually after complete control and roboticizing of an individual, a human being. Just as you would want to control a toy or a wind-up toy or a robot or something like that. So they used a variety of methods to achieve this. There were drugs, there were LSD experiments, there was mescaline, there was heroin, there was alcohol, there was marijuana. They tried a number of methods. I think what has worked best for them is the electromagnetic experiments, because when those started to happen, they no longer had to capture an individual and bring him to a laboratory setting. All they had to do was sit in a console in a building somewhere and aim a signal at a satellite or a ground station or whatever to the individual. They're safely at a remote location, and no one can really, even at this time, can detect or triangulate exactly where the signal was coming from and who was sending it. So they were safely undetected, and they could study and interact with anybody they wanted to, and observe their reactions, observe if they're actually what they were able to observe, how they are able to observe exactly how they are affecting individuals with these frequencies, and actually get thoughts back. They can get biological processes, information about our biological state. All this information are able to process remotely and send back to a human being. There's actually a couple of patents I could read to you.
Yes, okay.
That actually demonstrate this point. One of them is actually held by the United States Air Force, and this one is it's called Using the Radio Frequency Hearing Effect Apparatus for Audibly Communicating Speech. And this patent was issued in July 1st, 2003. So, and the assignee for this patent is the United States of America, as represented by the Secretary of the Air Force. This invention relates to the modulating of signals on carriers, which are transmitted and the signals intelligibly recovered, and more particularly to the modulation of speech on a carrier, and the intelligible recovery of the speech by means of the radio frequency hearing effect. So actually, what this means is they're able to deliver the human voice to the human mind by what's called the radio frequency hearing effect, and they're able to actually hear, you receive a signal back, which is basically your own thoughts, and communicate to a person by computer or by brain or various methods. So this is what also is called synthetic telepathy or voice to skull, the ability to broadcast human voice into a person's mind. And this is a patent. This is important knowledge because there are so many in the public that are not aware of this technology, and because they aren't, there are certain atrocities that are happening. When people hear voices that tell them to commit heinous acts, criminal acts, and you hear this all the time on the news, that people hear that they heard a voice that tell them to kill their children or their parents or what have you. It's these voices are using this effect to get people to do these to commit these atrocities. So we're hoping to save a lot of lives with the information that these voices are out there, this technology is out there, it's being used, and so that people will be aware and to not to do some of these things, because we have people in the community that are often urged to harm people. They hear these voices that tell them, to urge them to do that. So we know that this technology is out there, it's being used, and that some of this criminal activity is because of people using these devices.
I see. And there is something I'd like to mention. I think along with some of the drugs that you listed, LSD, I read, was commonly used for such purpose as to help get people under mind control. And I wanted to ask you about, you said I wanted to mention audio spotlight that's actually been used commercially on billboards in intersections when people are walking by. Once they're in the direct line of the sound beam, essentially, because a lot of people are used to light being able to be directed very specifically, like by a flashlight, as opposed to just general light lighting us up right now, like a lamp. And they're not realizing yet that they have now developed technology to where sound can also be similarly directed. And I don't remember the name of the movie right now. I'll look for that. But there was at least one film or something like that that was being advertised through a major billboard at an intersection, so that only when the people walked into the specific sound beam, they would hear the voice being directed to them to help market the film. So you mentioned...
That's right.
Go ahead. You mentioned that there...
The spotlight is being...
Sorry about the time lag. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, if you wanted to elaborate, please go ahead.
I was going to say the audio spotlight is being used commercially, and it's a similar technology where people can hear, as long as you're in the line of the beam, you can hear the human voice, and it sounds like it's whispering in your ear. And actually, there's somebody in our community that actually demonstrated this audio spotlight, and he had purchased one, and he was actually, I didn't. I'm trying to remember if they did that on me or not. But he was demonstrating it to a number of people, the audio spotlight. So it's a device that could inform people, educate them that this technology is in existence, whereby they and only they could be the target of the human voice. So and to alert people that it may not be just in their own mind, but it could be coming from a device, an actual device that somebody is using on them. So Nick Bakich actually used this device to demonstrate voice-to-skull technology in the European Parliament back in 1998. And because of his demonstration of the audio spotlight, they then released a resolution, the European Parliament did, calling for a ban on technologies that manipulate human beings. So this was about 15, 16 years ago now that he did that, and our European counterpart is actually trying to get legislation passed about these mind control technologies, and so this has a precedent in Europe, and we're hoping that we can get some similar legislation and resolutions passed here in the U.S. So using these technologies that are commercially available can help to show people that these classified technologies do exist, which are far more intrusive than the audio spotlight, but it's a harmless way of demonstrating what is possible.
Right, and I did actually see that there was at least a BBC News video report on audio spotlight, so it's not something that people cannot find if they do some looking for that, but it unfortunately seems that kind of information is not as well spread to the public, at least here in the United States of America, as one would hope. Now, you ended that particular email with, there is also a good support network in the DC area. Would you tell us something about what the support networks can help to do?
Well, the support networks are for a variety of purposes. First of all, it is a baseline means of more support to those that are being targeted. because oftentimes when people come to our organization, they have been stressed out to the max of human tolerance, and many are emotionally strung out by the time that they reach us, because they are harassed to the point where they feel like, in some instances, they're ready to commit suicide. So they are relieved, actually, to find our organization and to understand that they are not alone, and that they're not the only ones who are being harassed off their jobs, who are being who have their vehicles tampered with, who have their homes entered. The protocol is to stress an individual to the maximum, mentally and sometimes physically, to cause them to act out in some way that would be either suicide or homicide, or would land them in a mental institution or jail. So this seems to be the protocol. It seems to be the end game for this harassment, for this targeting, and we are usually able, when people come to us, to interrupt that cycle, and to people becoming productive citizens again, and to managing the stress, and to being able to cope from day to day, as long as there's a support system available to them whereby they can express the stress that's happening to them, or the anger or the frustration or what have you. There is an outlet for them, and they can. It makes it easier to cope with their situation, whatever it might be. So that is it's basically victim support. That's one of our main functions as an organization, along with the activism to elected officials and to the media, as far as getting information to these groups, so that our members can receive help for their particular situation.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to note one last thing in conclusion and ask you one last thing related. Some of the mainstream news reports on televised that I've seen seem to be trying to suggest that Mr. Alexis was in fact a representative member of Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. And from my understanding, even looking at this email set properly, just reading how you mentioned how he might be able to, or he mentions how he might be able to become part of the organization, or you mentioned how he might be able to become part of the organization. I remember that I just closed out the email set, but I remember the word become and other things that seemed to clearly indicate to me that he was coming to you anew, and he was not in fact yet a member of Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. Is that correct?
Well, no, he wasn't a member. In fact, he felt that he could not allow himself to become involved in any way. I mean, he could talk on a telephone. He wanted, he wanted someone's address, and I guess he felt he would just come by somebody's house or apartment and talk to them. But I don't think that we got that far in correspondence with him in terms of, and that would be kind of difficult anyway, because there are a certain amount of trust issues with many in the community. So there would have to have been some type of correspondence, either by instant message or preferably by most people communicate by telephone regardless. But in Aaron's case, he felt he was too restricted.
I understand.
Getting himself was in trouble, so.
Okay, and I want.
We tried to involve.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that we try to involve people in the community as much as possible for their own safety and for their own emotional support. It just works out better for them. And I still have to encourage people to come to the calls, to become involved in the groups, because people sometimes tend to isolate themselves when they come under attack, physical attack or mental attack. Sometimes people isolate themselves. So I'm often trying to encourage them to become involved in that way. If by sharing what's happening with others, they might find solutions for their own situation. So these are some of the benefits of a community.
Now, I do want to give you the opportunity to share what your stance is on violence and so forth, like where you're coming from as freedom from covert harassment and surveillance, because from everything I have seen, I would have a very hard time believing that you would encourage any kind of dangerous behavior in any way. But so obviously, I have an opinion based on having followed the newsletter over several years regularly and so forth. I see the kind of information you put out, and I've been on some of the conference calls, at least listening. But I'd like, I think that there's some people out there for some reason that seem to be trying to paint a certain picture. I'd like to give you a fair opportunity to put forward what your goals are as freedom from covert harassment and surveillance with regard to all this.
Okay, certainly, and thanks for that opportunity. Our organization is basically a victim support organization, and no one has anything to fear from our group. Then they would need to fear a rape crisis center for housing battered women. Those that come to us are usually battered in some way. What we try to do is provide a space of mental and sometimes physical support for them, a place where they feel safe to talk about their experiences and to diffuse their emotions. So we do have a statement on our website where we state for the record that we do not condone violence, that we seek peaceful methods to resolve this targeting situation. So that's basically our goal, is to reach out to the media, to the general public, to our officials, in search of answers, and to what's happening to so many of our members. And we're seeking medical attention for some of them who are being severely battered and abused. There are some of them have developed serious medical conditions that need to be addressed, and ideally by a physician who is aware of the technologies and the types of conditions they can bring on. So that would be ideal, although that is very, very rare and to find, and mainly because this type of training is not taught in medical school, how to deal with electromagnetic radiation attacks. So this is a new area. With doctors, we do have a medical committee. We have nurses, we have a pharmacist, we have a dietitian, and all of those professions work together to try to help our members be as safe as possible and to be as healthy as possible.
I appreciate you answering.
Even though there isn't specific training in medical schools for that, we come as close as we can.
I didn't understand completely the very last sentence that you said.
I said there isn't medical training per se for electromagnetic attacks, but those in our medical committee members, we come as close as we can with this in mind, with the EMA attacks in mind, and to addressing those physical concerns.
Okay, and by EM attacks, you're referring to electromagnetic attacks?
Yes.
Okay, and the very last question I have for you is, what are the numbers of people affected and people involved with freedom from covert harassment and surveillance, and what are some references you can itemize for people who would like to check? Because the reason I'm asking you this partly is I've heard some people kind of reference the alleged numbers, like it really might not be that many people complaining about it, but I know from direct experience of the interactions I've received over the last several years through Snowyoke that there are in fact many people. I would hardly even begin to know just how many. So could you point us to where we could check some of these numbers for the general population to understand just how many people are coming forward with complaints like this, and how many people are connected already to freedom from covert harassment and surveillance?
Okay, as far as our group is concerned, our numbers range from about 2,500 to maybe even as far as 3,000. As far as actual victims in the United States, I've heard several estimates, 300,000. The Justice Department estimates it's about 500,000 victims who complain to them that they have 3 or more people that are stalking them, which is one indicator of how many actual victims there are in the U.S. This is a result of a 2006 survey that the Department of Justice issued. And one of our guests in a recent Saturday Night podcast said that during his time, he was someone who was abducted as a child and indoctrinated by these people who are the stalkers, whoever they might be, on base on Montauk Island in New York. It's an Air Force base that was used for experimentation at that time. And those people that were indoctrinating him informed him that 12 to 15% of the population is targeted, whether that by electromagnetic or mind control technologies or the stalking or what have you. But that's how many that they were targeting. And if that was true, then we're looking at numbers anywhere from 36 to 45 million people who are targeted. Most of these people obviously are unaware they are being targeted, which makes what we are doing very important, because once people realize, and we've done radio programs where people, after listening to us, realize that they also are being targeted. So once people hear that symptoms and so forth, and hear our experiences, then they're clued in that some of the things that are happening to them are not the result of natural causes, but of actual a targeting experience that's happening to them, a group of individuals who are specifically targeting them for organized stalking or for the electronic body attacks. So education of the general public is basically our goal, and hopefully we will find a lot of help so that victims, however many there might be, can find help and relief in some way. So that's basically our goal, and we're hoping that these attacks, once it becomes completely public, once there is a certain point of media saturation about our issues, that some of these attacks would cease, and that hopefully we'll be free of covert harassment and surveillance. So hopefully that will happen.
I hope so too. And now, lastly, I've seen, just to complete out that last question, I have seen that you do have a presence on Facebook. I'm one of the people who's clicked to follow the Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance community on Facebook, and I see quite a many people there as well. Would you tell us the most recent number or range, estimated number, if you're not sure exactly what number it's at now?
You mean on Facebook?
Yes, because that's a place where if a reporter, for example, wanted to reference, well, where are you getting the idea that there's hundreds of people, at least from within freedom from covert harassment, surveillance support, or what have you, I think that would be a place that could be pointed to that's publicly visible is the community page on Facebook. And I remember it being at least in the hundreds. Can you tell us the most recent number that you remember?
Well, I remember, it seems like there's like 179, as I recall, something like that, of likes on our page that I recall. Of course, there are hundreds of people that see our page daily, and so hopefully we'll see more increasing numbers as this issue becomes more exposed to the public. But our Facebook page is very dynamic. We get a lot of traffic from people who are first-time visitors who are just finding out about the technology and the attacks that are happening to them, and there's interaction there. And so our Facebook page is a vehicle of outreach to those who are targeted and is of information to the general public, as is our website, which is freedomfchs.com.
How many people have requested to receive the Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance newsletter?
Our newsletter circulation stands at this point around 2,200, and it's getting to be close to 2,300 on our email list. So the thing about our email list is that there are people that are dropped inadvertently every week for some unknown reason, and I'm not sure how many are dropped and for what reason. So the number sometimes fluctuates, but it generally is on an incline. And we started in 2008, and now we're up to about 2,300.
Also, I will say, I'll double check this because I'm just going from memory right now, but I believe that your numbers are higher than what you're last remembering on your community page. And also, it might be a combination, I'm thinking of, between your community page and is there also a group page for Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance?
Well, I think there is some type of a group page. I haven't visited that site for quite a while.
I see.
Or I don't know if it's even still around. But I maintain our official website, our page on Facebook.
Okay.
And it was either 17. I was looking at the number this week, and it seems like 179 is what I remember.
Okay.
But I thought there was more than that. It could be something on the hundreds, but I thought it was more than that. And
I recall that too. I think but I'm going just from memory also. And it might be the combination. And I did see the group format still online relatively recently, so it might be a combination I'm thinking of numbers of people in the group added to people in the Facebook community page.
Well, maybe so. There's
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, that's it. So if you wanted to add anything final, I was just going to thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me here, Sahar, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this issue and to share our experience with the general public. It's very important that people understand what our group is about, what the mind control technologies are about, and how it affects us. And because I believe that ultimately this technology will affect everyone and not just our group here. So I think it's something that's important for everybody.
I think so too, and I do want to say, because I really wanted to make sure to give you every opportunity to say anything you want, that people need to be aware of today. We're about the time we'll be dropping off of the visual feed capture, but the audio capture should still be going if need be. Was there any last thing you wanted to add?
If there was anything, a last comment, I would just urge everyone who is watching this or hearing about this issue for the first time to visit our website, and to also, if someone is trying to explain to you about the mind control technologies and the effect that it's having upon them, is to try to listen with an open mind, because this is something that's happening not only to them, but can happen to you, to everybody as well. This technology is capturing more people every single day, and we hear from people who have just been captured into this program, into the matrix, a few days ago, a few weeks ago, and which tells us that they are still out there recruiting people to do the handling and victimizing more people, capturing people into this program. So, and once you're into this this harassment paradigm, there isn't any way out of it that we know of. So I've been going through this since for 30 years, and they intend to be here harassing, taunting, interrupting at every opportunity for the rest of my life is their intention. So, and that has been the case for most everyone else that I know of.
How do you keep going? I think that is important for people to hear. As far as what you could say without compromising your own, I don't want you to compromise, to reveal something that would be used against you, and then, it's no longer works for you. But if it's something that you could share publicly without compromising your own safety, then how do you essentially manage to keep on really thriving in a way that many targets have not been able to accomplish under such harassment?
Well, what's encouraging for me is that the interaction that I get from the community itself. I'm basically a people person, and there are new people to interact with all the time, or just interacting with the community, trying to form groups, trying to link up connections. Developing support networks, trying to reach out to those who can help us, those that have resources about this technology and about people's experiences. So all of this interaction keeps me quite busy and keeps me motivated to want to see freedom for all of us. So that is our goal, and that is something that we're working and striving for each and every day.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Robinson, and God bless you. Thank you.
God bless your invitation here.
Thank you.